Good evening on this glorious October 31st, 2019. To get a few disclaimers out of the way, I'm going to apologize in advance. Somebody may get sore with any of the considerations of music that I may describe later on or currently. It may not be goth enough, it may not be hardcore enough, or whatever. And I myself don't like labels. I consider myself Sunny. I'm not gonna be Sunny hardcore, dark Sunny or whatever. So, just take it as it is, and I hope I don't offend too many people. Although my incessant babbling and trying not to go off track or off topic. So I will try to keep the course on a foundation. And these are my views, my songs, my stuff. Not my songs, but stuff that I listen to. So this is the stuff I grew up listening to. This is, how I viewed life and music. Because music, to me, means a lot. For lack of a more better explanation. So anyway, aside from all that mumbo jumbo, when you're young, you don't have taste. You have to develop a taste. You may see things that you think they're cool, you think they sound great, but as you get older, it's not quite the case. There's always many youthful indiscretions, and I know I made a few myself. But aside from that, I will give a few notable mentions: the Beastie Boys, Houdini, L.A. Dream Team, early Ice-T. Not to say Body Count's a good band, but I prefer Drama and Colors and 6 in the Morning. Those are some pretty sick songs. But after that, developing, I think my first veering away from rap and hip hop, because it got more into the pop realm. And speaking of pop, the first thing that really caught my attention in 91, 92, I want to say. It's kind of a blur. My ears are kind of blurred. Whole lot has gone down in life. But anyway, aside from all that, I first heard a mixtape that a family member made me, and on there was Friday I'm in Love by The Cure. How can something so... You see these guys with big hair, makeup, they seem so dark, but yet the music that they're playing is very cheerful and happy. Well, I got into that band, and that was a very seed that explored music later on in life. From then on, I got into more band-driven music, bands that play instruments, no samplers, so on and so forth, no synthesizers, which I have no problem with now, but when you're developing taste, you try to go for the heavy stuff. So from then, you go to your Pearl Jams, your Nirvanas. It gets heavy, there's a lot of anger, and a lot of despondentness. Anyway, that's not enough. It's not fast enough for you. One day, when you're listening to Weezer, because, it's just not fast enough for you, you hear songs off the album Dookie, which at the time there were singles when I come around, Longview, Basket Case. I was thinking of Basket Case. I just couldn't quite, say it. So when you hear songs like that, it got faster. It got that album. Changed my life forever. It ruined my life in some ways, as I jokingly say. For there, faster it got faster. Got into Pennywise, NoFX, Social Distortion. You know, there's something about when you hear When She Begins or Let It Be Me or Damn, Cold Feelings, especially the acoustic version. Really hits me in a way and takes me back to a very place and time. But going back to the Nirvanas and the Pearl Jams, I, during that time was into Stone Temple Pilots, and this is going to be poignant because it's a seed that was planted. You see, there was a song on the album, or the soundtrack rather, for The Crow, and as I was veering away from bands like Stone Temple Pilots, there was a track on there by a band called Nine Inch Nails, and it ended up being a cover from a band called Joy Division. Which I didn't know at the time till a few years later when I saw the Love Will Tear Us Apart video at 3 in the morning, which I'll talk about in a moment. But at the time, I veered away from Nine Inch Nails because of their association with one Brian Warner, also known as Marilyn Manson. His P.T. Barnum-like backstory and very theatrical take on music and image definitely didn't really sit well with me. I was conservative growing up and still am, hold on to those values and things of that nature when it comes to conservatism. But I, even though I hold on to those things, I don't quite, I have, anyway, that's another topic I'm not going to get into at this very moment. But, that seed of, going from dark, kind of poppy, but really dark lyrics of The Cure to heavy synth, nihilism of Nine Inch Nails, that kind of, that piece connected. Everything is connected, but in different puzzle pieces that make a bigger picture. So, I didn't, really get into them yet. I would stay up late, even though it's, conservative, didn't drink, didn't smoke, do drugs or anything like that. But for whatever reason, there was kind of a rebelliousness of staying up all night for whatever reason, because you weren't really supposed to, where most people would be asleep, you would be up. So I'd watch all sorts of bands on late night TV. There used to be a show called ROV on KDOC and other stations. They would show videos by the Aquabats, Social Distortion, Pennywise, not much Green Day, NoFX. So at that time, those bands, when I was starting to get faster and faster into music, that, was my audio-visual mixtape, if you will. I got my new bands from late night TV. So at the time, you listen to bands like Social Distortion and such, and then you're like, Pennywise, faster, but what's faster with that heavier? So, good old karaoke, K-Rock in Los Angeles. For whatever reason, I was up listening to Furious 5 and 9. I heard one of the more heavier songs I've heard up to that point, and it was Be Quiet and Drive by Deftones. I know Chino at the time squealed a lot. That was much more outrageous and heavier than just screaming. So stuff like that was such a shock, if you will. And they were touring Ozfest at the time and Warped Tour, but that didn't get much coverage as their association with Ozfest. And you can imagine the kind of bands that were on, Ozfest. And as I soon learned, there was no corpse paint or, burning churches as you would imagine with a Mayhem or an Empire or, any of those Norwegian European bands, which I'm sorry, but that's kind of goofy, but whatever, that's neither the time nor place here. But anyway, as I discovered that they weren't spooky like that or heavy or dark or whatever as those bands are, you get in, speaking of spooky and dark, you discover other bands. At that time, Days of the Phoenix by AFI was being played, which from The Cure to Nine Inch Nails to AFI, you can kind of see linear little sprinklings of roots being planted there. From there, I got heavier, and to me at that point, from 2001, 2002, nothing got more heavier than the first time I saw a Thursday video. And that video, Understanding the Car Crash, that to me was heavy and violent to that point. Seeing them live for the Plea for Peace tour with Lawrence Arms and Poison the Well. Man, oh man, I haven't seen the Pit get that violent. I didn't get to see much screaming or heaviness than that. So goodness gracious, Thursday. And around that time I was listening to Thursday, I mentioned before, I was in the AFI at the time. I want to say Art of Drowning era. Davey would, in interviews, brought industrial bands out there. VV Nation. He would wear other bands, Death in June and bands like that, which you can imagine the weirdness of a Death by June. But anyway, reading interviews with bands like that, even though I heard of Sisters of Mercy and Skinny Puppy and bands like that earlier, it never really caught my ear. But for whatever reason, I was like, I'll give it a check. I'll check it out. So from there, I listened to Front 242, Frontline Assembly, of course, VV Nation, as mentioned before, because they were getting checked by bands like AFI. So, at the same time, there was those dark elements with heavy elements in my playlist, in my CDs, in my mixed CDs and stuff. So you can kind of see the direction where it's heading, dark and heavy at this point. From there you start hearing bands like Bleeding Through, Atreyu, 18 Visions. That was heavy to that point. And from there you see bands that they played with and infamous shows like with Unearthed, Through the Eyes of the Dead, Animosity, and the infamous, first time I ever seen them was legendary, Terror. Terror is, to me, I know there's Hatebreed, I know there's Madball, but for me, LA Hardcore, the band for me is Terror. I know it's kind of an underrated album, but like Always a Hard Way, that record, I think it's Always a Hard Way. 2006 when they were on tour for that album, the Sanctity of Brothers tour. That was the first time seeing them. That changed. That just got more hardcore from there. From earlier being in the bands like Pennywise and NoFX and Descendants. That, given like X amount of Monster Energies in 5 hours or whatever, just maximize, I sound like a vocalism here, but maximizing the fast and the heavy, man. Damn. Just people stage diving. I haven't seen shit like that ever. It was heavy, fast, beautiful. From there, I discovered bands I, may have, heard of before, like H2O, bands like that, and through that, H2O, and I mean, from the earlier podcasts, this is kind of where things in life started to really open up for me in a different way, and it kind of went full circle back to the way it was from day one with the rap and the hip hop. I mentioned before, sort of Toby from H2O's Twitter at the time, pre-Instagram, post Facebook, MySpace era. Not to say he was on any of those platforms, but Twitter was popping off in a more of a social way, not so much in a political way. But at the time, he would quote Nas, who came out with the Life is Good album, which, like a Terror, like a Thursday and AFI, Deftones, a Social Distortion, a Pennywise, just to go off, say those bands that this band, did A for me. Nas took me back to hip hop. When I hear Life is Good, that album is just as poignant, as any other album at the time, talking about staying positive and, his, at the time, mindset of being a parent, trying to be a parent, being older, not, fooling around as much, not getting into trouble as much, because, you see things differently at a certain age, which you can be as, whatever you want with your music, but if you don't change and you don't include your life and you keep things staying the same, things aren't going to ever, be as you're not going to change, you're not going to grow. So when I heard Nas, that album, and the talk of positivity, I can do nothing but to embrace that, because it was beautiful. At the time, I was not, when you're young, you're despondent, maybe a little nihilistic, and at the time, you see things differently. You want to grow. You're like, I can't stay angry forever, just like with anything. And you have to better yourself. You've got to get out of your, situation. And even though, you're in certain situations, they won't come overnight. You can't change overnight. And hell, after 7 years, I'm not where I want to be at, but I'm a lot better than I was 7 years ago. It's just like, I often joke about people recovering from substance or alcohol or whatever. You're recovering X. Well, I'm a recovering addict. I'm a recovering angry person. So that's how when I talk about PMA, positive mental attitude, that's kind of where my mind's headed, where I'm gonna go. This has gone a little longer than I wanted to, but Nas got me back in the hip hop. Moral Technique, Giant Mind Tricks, Vinny Paz, Dilated Peoples, and then you start hearing coverage from like artists like Reverie, Gavilan, High Tone, Little King G. You hear the music around your area, your spot, your city, and you have to embrace that, because that's where you're at, So I mean, I'm enlightened with hip hop again, good hip hop. I'm gonna address some more my view of unsavory type of rap and hip hop on the next episode. But aside from that, just staying in your bubble, staying in your frame of music, you gotta grow. There's bands that I've gotten a little more on the electronic tip, bands like Black Queen, Drab Majesty, Hell. There's even some bands who I always say punk's an attitude. It's not a fashion. You know, you can have all the spikes in the world, but if you don't have that attitude of, you know, being against the grain, that punk rock is, you know. There are certain bands that may be classified as punk, but they have a little more contemporary sounds, contemporary styles, and they have a punk attitude. So I can't hate on them, and there's some of the bands I'm wanting to give a chance right now, and I'm listening to some of their stuff. I'm not going to name them, but, you know, I mean, you can imagine who I may be talking about. And it's not that I'm hating on them, I just can't, for now, I just can't quite, you know, validate it to the 100th degree, even though it's about attitude. So, you know, gone full circle. Back to day one, back to hip hop. So that's kind of my musical journey. I was gonna, it did get, as I stated, dark. Why am I so dark inside? I'll name it that episode. This is the episode, that's what it's going to be called. So thank you for listening again. My recordings, my journey to how I got into certain bands, certain music. The next episode is going to be about mental health. And I'm still like, it's more a denser topic than I actually want to, you know, dive into, because there's way so much to veer off in. But for the most part, hey, I got something. I'm gonna try to get it up as soon as possible. This is going up on Monday, and as every Monday I try to put up a new episode. So thank you for listening, thank you for supporting. Catch this on YouTube, on Instagram at the Clean Canvas Podcast, and thank you, hope you enjoy.